Hello everyone, my name is Rochelle Innocent and I'm the founder and CEO of Project Purpose. Welcome to our channel. Our community is focused on fostering the intellectual and character development in children. We do this through our parent-child workshops that are focused on 4 themes: autonomy, self-efficacy, compassion, and self-concept, in order to cultivate grit, perseverance, and resilience in each child. And we are so thrilled to be offering one of the first of its kind digital, virtual, and continuous learning environments, enabling parents and children to connect from all around the world. At Project Purpose, our overarching mandate is to renew and rebuild family, community, and relationships. Our different social media platforms provide us with an opportunity to have discussions and to create space for all topics that relate to family, community, and relationships with ourselves as well as with others, with a primary focus on mental health and education. More precisely, the ways that the institutions of mental health and education play a role and have played a role in our societies at large. These discussions and debates provide us with an opportunity to think critically about what needs to change within these structures for us to live up to our bold slogan, support, protect, and empower each child through youth-focused development, better known as leadership in juvenescence. We recognize that in valuing our children's leadership potential, this also translates as recreating and co-creating environments, both socially and politically, that will enable our children to thrive. For those of you who are particularly keen on the topic, we also write thought pieces every other Sunday. We actually have a thought piece scheduled to drop this upcoming Sunday, so definitely be sure to meander over to the website and check out our online content. Now, if it is the case that you are looking for a listening alternative, well, we're available wherever podcasts are playing and providing you with access to a few links down below. Now, as is the convention, be sure to subscribe, hit that post notification bell so that you are aware of every time we post. And of course, if you like these conversations and you want to keep them going, like, comment, and share this segment. Let's get into it. Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another segment here on Project Purpose. For those of you who are new, we cover topics that relate to mental health, mental wellness, and education on a week-by-week basis. And today's topic of discussion is on mental wellness. On the conversation of mental wellness, I'm going to be talking about well-being, and I'm going to be talking about well-being anecdotally. I talked a little bit last week. I did a primer video actually for this video and talking about the juxtaposition that exists between agreeability and likability, and I talked a little bit about some of the ways that I show up that have created environments of hostility and violence, the way that people respond when I'm not agreeable. So I talked a little bit about agreeability and about the dimensions that people typically will play into or play on when it comes to them deciding what your level of agreeability should be and how that informs their sense of your likability. And so that is a precursor to this video specifically, and this video comes with a few trigger warnings because I'm going to talk about some of the violence that I've experienced more specifically. As a woman, as a small woman, I am fairly petite. While I'm 5'5", I'm like a fairly petite build woman, and how that violence has just become progressive throughout the years, and how sometimes we try to rationalize and create justifications for the experiences that we've had, but for certain things there just are no justifications at all. And I think when it comes to well-being, there are so many different ways that we try to protect ourselves, and part of how I try to protect myself is being very selective about how I share and what I share about some of the stories and some of the things that have impacted me. And so I have talked about quite a bit on my channel on my having been stalked, my having been terrorized, but I've never gone into as much detail as to be able to identify these people because I was still and am still being stalked and terrorized by these individuals. And I was hoping that if I stayed quiet and that I didn't mention their names, that it would go away, that it would neutralize. And this is despite having been given firm advice from people who work within the domain of supporting women who are escaping violence, that my case was the kind of case that was only going to escalate. And so it has taken me maybe up until now, up until last week. It was a small trigger, but it was a trigger that made me realize that this isn't going to go away with my silence. It's not going to go away with my silence, and there's nothing that I did to create this issue, and I don't think there's anything I can do to really resolve it. I have tried to resolve this issue so many different times, and I have failed each time, but I think what I can do is bring some awareness so that you can protect yourself maybe better than what I have and what I've done. And I have tried, and I'm still trying to protect myself, and I think that when it comes to figuring out like how we support ourselves when it is the case that we're confronted with violence. There's only so many things that we can do, right? There's only so many things that we can do, and especially if we're on our own. And luckily for me, I have not been on my own. I've definitely had support. It blows my mind because even my current partner got involved and had a few choice words with this individual, and it still didn't help. And so I want to start with the origin point, and I think that this is a good opportunity for me to insert a picture of my stalker, because my stalker, the person who was stalking me, I don't want to claim this individual by any means, he started out as my mentor, not just my mentor, but the mentor at the Leadership Development Lab, which is the top program for leadership development at the top business school in Canada, which is Rotman's School of Management at University of Toronto. And so he has been the one who has been stalking me, who has been terrorizing me for now the last 5.5, maybe more years. I can at least have a sense as to the timeline about 5.5 years ago, because I think his interest definitely started when I enrolled in his program, and it's only escalated since in the most toxic and terrifying of ways. And so this is Scott Rutherford. And so Scott Rutherford is not only the leader, the managing director of the Leadership Development Lab, he is also a senior leader at McKinsey. So if you know what McKinsey is, it is the top consulting firm globally. And Rotman School of Management is a big name in Canada and North America. And while it's not been very well known since I've been across the ocean, it still carries enough weight that it's allowed me to really have an opportunity to roam some of the different business schools when I was in France, as I was getting my foot on the ground and figuring out like my next steps when I was living in France a few years ago. And so this story starts in the Leadership Development Lab, and I have really gone through this a few times. So I'm not going to go into as much detail, but I want to go into enough detail so that you can understand why I'm still trying to wrap my head around how this escalated into being such a violent situation. And so when I think about it, I was in his development program and along with other students as well, and I built Project Purpose there. So my original idea, the idea that is now Project Purpose, it was incubated in the development lab. And so some people, their challenges were just to do better within different clubs, or was to, have management or leadership conversations. But I wanted to build a business. And over and above that, so the Leadership Development Lab was in the second year of the 2-year MBA program. I did the full-time program at Rotman School of Management. And I decided in that second year that I wanted to move to France. And so one of the challenges with this leadership development program that Scott had put out was he wanted to create an alumni community. So people really weren't all that comfortable with the idea of making the community available remote, because there was this very sensitive topics that we talked about within the development lab. It was a very close-knit group. It gave us an opportunity to be vulnerable, to be open, to be honest about our insecurities, about the things that we wanted to grow in. It was a really very amazing program. I enjoyed the program immensely. It was definitely very invested, emotionally invested in my own development and in just the way that the group in and of itself was managed, was supported. And I thought Scott was an amazing leader. I had nothing but great things to say about Scott. I really enjoyed the program and being in that program with him. And the challenge was really to create an alumni community. So this program had been around for I think about 4 years at the time. And each year he wanted the program to evolve to have an alumni community, and it never ended up working out. But because I'm a planner, I love planning, I love building communities. It was what I did in my professional life before the MBA program. I was so happy to put together an alumni community. I put someone in charge of the alumni community as well, and he was managing the different programs that I had already put in place. I had put the placeholders, I had put the subject matters, I'd gotten the commitments from the other directors in this leadership development lab so that they would host these sessions, knowing that I would not be able to participate because the group was just not ready to go remote. So I built the entire program, I put this program together, and then I moved to France. And when I moved to France, I thought I was saying goodbye to everyone, at least for now, right? Because I didn't really know what was going to happen in France, but for me, it was the next chapter in the life that I wanted to take. And so what I didn't realize was there were different people who were from my alumni community who were reaching out to me to check in on me while I was in France. And I realize now in hindsight that it was Scott sending these people out to reach out to me to see how everything was going. I didn't know at the time, but they were previous alumni members or people who were from my first year MBA class who knew me well enough that they probably were giving Scott some information about me as well. Not realizing what his intent was, and they couldn't because not even I knew what his intentions were. And so 6 months of me living in France, I got an email from Scott directly asking to visit me while I was in France, like asking to visit me. So he was flying by and he was in the area and he wanted to grab a coffee. And so I felt at the time like just so honored. I felt so honored. I felt so excited because I was going to have an opportunity to have a coffee with Scott, and not just any coffee, but a coffee in Paris with Scott, and talk a little bit about the last 6 months and how things were evolving. And the whole premise of this coffee was over Project Purpose, which was the company, the idea that I had germinated, that I had started in his leadership program. So this coffee happened around November, December. I don't remember the exact month, but he came. He didn't know that I was French. He didn't know that I was bilingual. We had the coffee, and that's when we took that picture that I showed you. We took that picture, and that was the beginning of the end of life the way that I knew it. And I didn't realize just how much danger I was in it. Sometimes I look at that picture and I think like she was so naive. Like, look how big her smile is. She has no idea what she's getting herself into. And so that coffee, before we took that picture, he asked me if whether or not he could pay for my living expenses. He wanted to pay for me to live so that I could focus on Project Purpose. So he essentially wanted me to stop my job search and stop doing what I was doing in Paris, and he was going to take care of me essentially. That was his proposition. And I was caught completely off guard. I did not think that this was the reason why I was going to be having coffee with Scott. I didn't think that he had a romantic interest in me at all. I thought he was my mentor, and I was just a little bit shocked, right? So I was like, no, I did decline immediately after his offer was put on the table. And I think he saw how just shocked and confused I was, and I just thought it was just him being kind, not recognizing it was inappropriate. Like, I really just gave him completely the benefit of the doubt because it was inconceivable to me that someone I respected so much would, after me graduating from the program, like 6 months after, come to ask me for a coffee simply to put me in a really uncomfortable position. And I also thought this because he also was very vulnerable in the program. I knew that his first wife had left him with his 2 children, and that was a very painful experience for him. I knew he was also married in this moment. So I just thought it was just a faux pas. I thought it was a faux pas. I really didn't think too much into it, but I was shocked. I was caught off guard, and I immediately declined. And so him being Scott and being a mastermind is what I will call him, like a master manipulator. He immediately was like, well, I'd love for you to meet my wife. I'd love to, like, I really just am very focused on Project Purpose. I want to see Project Purpose succeed. And I was also doing a proof of concept where I was just trying some of the different philosophies that I was building out by way of the workshops that are part of Project Purpose with a child that I was working with. I was watching this child after work as part of a part-time gig. I had an agreement with the parents that I would do my proof of concept for my business while I was watching their child and just provide commentary where I thought was appropriate, that I felt was in line with how the development program that I was building was going to support children in general. And so with that premise in mind, Scott did visit me another 3 times in total, I think, since I've been in France. So maybe 3 to 4 times when I was living in France. I did see Scott. I met his wife. I met one of his children. His child slept over at my place. Then I did also have other classmates who were now part of my alumni community check in on me in France. Never once in my mind thinking that this was anything more than curiosity and excitement for what I was building across the ocean. And so fast forward, the pandemic hits. I end up moving back to Canada, and I am still unsure as to whether or not I want to stay in Canada, but I was happy that I was able to get back to Canada right before COVID got very terrible, like very bad. And of course, I reached out to Scott to help me figure out, like, well, maybe if I have a recruitment pipeline, if I find a good opportunity, then that will be an incentive enough to stay. And so coming back to Canada, his immediate proposal, because I had kept him at arm's length from Project Purpose, I just felt there was too much of a power disparity there. He was completely happy to help me with my recruitment prospects. He helped me start my recruitment at McKinsey, which I did recruit for. But his only request was that I would really involve myself in the alumni community that I had built prior to leaving. So it was kind of fizzling out and needed to be reinvigorated. And since I was back in Toronto, he would love for me to take that on as a project. And so so that was sort of the exchange, the deal that we had made at that point in time. And so I was happy to do that. I started my recruitment off at McKinsey, but as I had mentioned in a previous video on the topic of me getting stalked, I will put that video up here. I just felt like I couldn't do both, right? Like I would either do the alumni community and work somewhere else so that I could have Scott have proximity to Project Purpose, but I would not feel comfortable with Scott having proximity with Project Purpose because I knew ultimately he wanted to support me with my business. I didn't feel comfortable him supporting me with Project Purpose. She was still very, very tiny then. And also me working at McKinsey because I felt like he held all the cards and it would just be uncomfortable for me to decline or say no or to challenge an idea that he had about Project Purpose if I was also working in his house, like if I was working at McKinsey. So I felt like because I was back at Rotman and supporting the alumni community, and that was with Scott, that I had to pick and choose. It was either the alumni community and Project Purpose with Scott, or it was going to be McKinsey and no Project Purpose with Scott. And I knew that Scott wanted the Project Purpose, so I actually bowed out of the recruitment with McKinsey. But what I didn't do was have a conversation with him about it. I didn't tell him like the reason why I would prefer to work elsewhere is because I know that you ultimately want to have a say with Project Purpose, and I just would feel more comfortable with your involvement in Project Purpose if I wasn't also working at McKinsey and also working at Rotman School of Management. It just makes me feel like I'm like completely in your way. So there's more of that and all of the developments that took place in the video that I had done on the clinical psychopaths a few years back. So I don't want to get too much into those details because I already did, but I did end up going on the run because of that. So what ended up happening is he tried to force me, pigeonhole me into a role. He looped in Adidas. I had worked at Adidas prior to doing my MBA, so I don't know what he told them. It was a lie, but he looped them in. And when I realized that all of the stalking, all of the cyber attacks, all of the hacking, like everything that he did was to pigeonhole me into this role, like that was what I thought at the time. I felt so frazzled and so just shocked by it. I was like, I need to get out of here. I was like, I need to leave. And so I set up my plans to go, and I ended up just breaking routine because I figured they had a sense of my routine. They didn't suspect that I knew what they were up to at this stage in time, and I made a run for it. I thought I would be able to drive the full way to Vancouver Island. My target was Vancouver Island, and I figured I would just stay there, continue to build Project Purpose until I could find myself a role back in Europe, because I decided with all of the chaos that was going on with my family, the falling out, going no contact with my mother, and that is another video that I'll put up here. And then now with Scott being this person who I just did not recognize, like it was just not something that I saw him ever being able or capable of doing. I was like, it's all the more confirmation that my time in Canada has been spent. I was much happier in France anyway, and I was going to leave. And so I was able to stay in Winnipeg for 4 months undetected. And while I was in Winnipeg, I met Alex Lamb. And Alex Lamb is a police officer who I met while I was completely in shock and horribly traumatized because I ended up in Winnipeg accidentally. Like I didn't mean to stay there. I was going to drive through Winnipeg, but unfortunately I was through a series of a bunch of horrible, like unpredictable events. I was targeted to get abducted, and part of that target was someone offering me to drive a car from one dealer to a different dealer. I was trying to find my way to Winnipeg because at this time, because of COVID, no one was doing cross-country rentals, and the rental that I had that got me from Toronto to Thunder Bay like didn't work out. Like it didn't work out, so I ended up having to give that rental back in Thunder Bay. So I was looking for a ride out. So I was just calling all these different dealerships and all these different like just kind of like random car shops, I guess, like car auto businesses. And so this man was like, I'd love to help a woman in need, like come by, like tell me what your issue is. And so he was telling me that I would save him money if I drove one of his cars that he needed to sell, that he was making a trade with someone in Winnipeg. If I drove it to the dealer in Winnipeg, then all I needed to do was pay for the gas, and he was saving money on freight. So I was calling around everywhere to find a rental that would get me to Vancouver, but he could get me as far as Winnipeg. And if I was okay with that, then that was going to work for the both of us because he didn't want to have to pay the freight to have the car shipped. I needed to drive it. That would be the way it would go. So I packed the car up with all of my stuff. I took all my stuff. I was in an Airbnb at the time, and I packed up all my stuff. I drove out to Winnipeg only to realize it was an abduction scheme. It was a way to abduct me. I didn't actually, the address he gave me wasn't a dealership in Winnipeg. It was a motel in Winnipeg. Winnipeg, and he had a very creepy, very sketchy human ready to pick me up there. And so that was horribly traumatizing, knocked all of my plans completely off, and it ended up being housebound in Winnipeg. But luckily, like, I freaked out and I told the Airbnb host like what was going on, because I was very confident that these people were going to abduct me out of my Airbnb home. And she sent in an undercover cop, and that undercover cop was Alex Lamb. And so that's gonna be a second video. But Alex Lamb, I told him everything about Scott. I told him everything about me being stalked and why I was on the run and how I wanted to build this new life, but like everything was going horribly wrong. And I thought that was gonna help me, because I had dated a cop for 2 years who also did undercover policing, like he did containment, and I knew that that's what Alex was doing. Like, it didn't take long for me to pick that up. I told him everything, not realizing that it was gonna take a turn for the worse. So I actually don't know why it took a turn for the worse. So I ended up now out of Winnipeg, and I did take Alex's advice, and he told me to stay in Winnipeg until the snow died down, because I was just not able to drive with the snow very well, and I wasn't in a rush. I was trying to build a new life. I didn't need to be on Vancouver Island anytime soon. So I took his advice. I stayed in Winnipeg. I helped myself to reground myself, to be recentered, because I was very shaken by those events. So I didn't need the time regardless. And as soon as the snow melted, I headed out to Vancouver. Well, Alex headed out with me, and he began the smear campaign in Vancouver. Everywhere that I moved to, he was telling everyone that I was a criminal, was involved in criminal activity. Like, I don't know what specifically he was doing, but from one day to another, like, people loved me. They were so inviting to me, and then they were just very afraid of me. And I realized that it was Alex Lamb. And then within a couple of months, no, I think it was about 3 months, Scott realized that I was in Vancouver Island. So part of me feels like they were working together. Part of me just can't grasp the idea that in 1 year, I had amassed 2 people who were stalking me and who were terrorizing me. But that ended up being what happened. And that escalated into me needing to be in a program for women escaping violence, and not just one, but for all 4 that are on Vancouver Island, I had to participate in, because of the extent of violence that these men were portraying. And it was in the program that I had to face the reality that it was only going to end with me dying, right? Because I thought they were just trying to intimidate me and bully me because they could, but they would leave me alone at some point in time. But I was told in that program, the woman who dealt with the kind of violence that I was dealing with, that was escalating violence, where they were hiring goons to follow me, to terrorize me, to slam on my windows, to shake my door, to come into my apartment and then run out. And I think they also probably paid off my roommate to give them access to my apartment as well. Like, there were just so many things that they were doing to terrorize me, and I just couldn't fathom that it was going to end with me dying. Like, I felt like I was just too grown up for that to happen. I just thought that, like, they were both like respectable people who did their due diligence to like be good people in the world, and how could they, together or apart, be the reason why my life was falling completely just to pieces, like complete and utter chaos. And she was just like, and like, I kept getting asked by the people in the program, like, did you sleep with these men? Did you sleep with them? Like, what kind of relationship did you establish with them for them both to be so obsessive? And I didn't do anything. I did not sleep with them at the very least. Like, Scott, I thought, was a mentorship relationship, and I thought that his obsession was with Project Purpose. It was in the violence programs that they're like, the obsession was with you. Like, he has the money and the resources to rebuild his own company. Like, it has nothing to do with Project Purpose. It has to do with you. And at that point, like, even his messaging, and he has found ways to message me, to send violent, horrific messages to me without, I'm sure, it being traced, because like now with social media, there's so much that you can do with bots. There's so many different ways that you can get a message to someone without it being traced back to you, but you and that person know that that communication came across. So I thought that it would end when I left Canada, but they followed me to Portugal. And in Portugal, like, because I was living in Airbnbs, I was trying not to stay anywhere too permanent because of what I experienced in Vancouver. I had my hair cut on the metro, traveling to and from work. They would cut my hair, or they would find people at my work to spread rumors about me, to spread lies about me. And it was just horrific, right? It was a perfect nightmare that has continued until now, where they have less and less influence in making my life miserable, because people are asking more critical questions, and also because like I met my partner while I was in Portugal the first time, which is completely unreal, because like first I was still very traumatized from Vancouver Island, and I was still being terrorized in Portugal, and my focus was on living, was on surviving, because I realized by the time I was in Portugal, when I realized that they were still stalking me in Portugal, that they wanted to kill me. Like, there was no way that they would spend the money to travel abroad squad to just have a yelling match, you know? But luckily enough for me, I met my partner who realized I was being stalked. And I think that that was its own validation because, I mean, the woman who helped me back in Canada, like they had done the most that they were able to do to support me. But now I have my partner who realized what was going on. And I felt like that was its own validation. And he wasn't scared away from them because I thought there was no way anyone would want to start a relationship with me with all the monsters that I was dealing with, which were like these human people who would hire everyone and anyone to continue this reign of terror on me. And so I want to think about, when I think about well-being, when I think about violence against women, I have dealt with violence in the past. Like, you know, as a child, you know, when boys like you, they hit you, they hurt you. Even I have a few toxic relationships that were really unhealthy, but nothing could have prepared me for the violence that these two men on their own have exacted. And with the communities at their disposal, right? So Scott definitely did tell me that my saying no to him would cost me everything, and it cost me everything, but none of the things that I regret losing. I think everything that he was able to take from me, I didn't need anyway. And as it relates to Alex, it just is very disappointing that someone who is in policing makes it look so ugly, to be able to use his resources, to use what's at his disposal to just create so much damage. But what I can do, all that I can really do now at this stage, after I have tried to do so much to stop these men who have too much power and privilege for me to stop on my own, is to give you their names. Because maybe for you, whoever is listening to this video, you might see them, you might meet them, and you can do something differently than what I've done, which is really just avoid them as much as possible. But if you're watching this from Canada or elsewhere, and you have sway and you have influence, or if you have any sort of interaction with these gentlemen, stay away from them. They are dangerous men, and while they smile and they know how to put on a good act, they have been the reason why the last 4 years of my life have been so difficult. So that was what this video is really about. It's just about sharing, because I think part of our well-being, sometimes even I can get caught up in trying to protect myself with silence. And I have tried to tell as much as I could while not invoking anger by telling you their names. But I have dealt with so much violence, so much anger anyway, that I might as well just tell you their names and see if that changes the way that I have been treated for the last 4 years. By Scott in the last, I think now 3 years from Alex. And it's just been this never-ending story that I couldn't wrap up in one video, but this is enough for now. In any case, that gives you something to ponder. Be vocal, always. When you think that the right thing to do is to not say their name, say their name. I think that this probably could have ended earlier if I was open and vocal about their names before now, but at least I'm doing it now, so I'm not gonna beat myself up over it. But if there is someone who is hurting you, who is abusing you, using their power as leverage over you, you need to give their names to as many people as possible. Like, everyone who has helped me escape this violence knows their names. And it's funny because those communities, knowing their names hasn't been enough. He has too much power and influence that he's been able to silence them, but maybe me speaking their names in the ether on my channel will have a different effect and maybe change the course of the next few months and the next few years of my life as well. So in any case, that was it, but definitely not all. Always speak up and speak out about the things that you're dealing with behind closed doors, and Project Purpose has been such an amazing outlet for me to stay grounded, to stay centered, to stay focused on something that wasn't the violence and the hatred and the anger that I have been dealing with for the last few years behind the scenes, and hopefully this will change the tone of all of that now. In any case, that was it, but definitely not all. Now, before letting you go, I would be remiss if I didn't let you know that we will be going live at least twice a month, every month for the foreseeable future. Definitely be sure to tune in. Now, these events are paid events, so if you do see yourself participating in our community on an ongoing basis, then I do suggest that you take a look at one of our package plans. Yes, so we do offer package plans over and above our live events, as well as access to webinars and workshops that largely focus on self-mastery over and above these events. So check it out. Be part of our game changer community, being part of the change that you want to see, allowing us a small role to play in your journey. We are on the road to 1K, so we do invite you to follow us across all of our social media platforms, and we look forward to chatting with all of you very soon. We'll talk to you later.